The glass of water sat on the counter between them, and Grace hadn't touched it yet. She would. In about 90 seconds, she'd take a sip without thinking, the way people do when they're tired and pregnant and 8 hours into a 10-hour shift. She wouldn't taste anything wrong. She wouldn't feel it at first. She'd just keep moving, refilling coffee, wiping down tables, pressing a hand to the small of her back when no one was looking. The man sitting at the counter had ordered toast and black coffee. He ate neither. He watched her the way someone watches a clock, not with interest, but with patience, waiting for a specific moment. His name was Marcus Hale. His net worth was $4.2 billion. And 7 minutes ago, while Grace had turned to grab the coffee pot, he had opened a capsule over her glass and tapped the powder in with one finger. The motion took less than 2 seconds. The security camera above the register had a dead pixel in the exact spot where his hand moved. That wasn't luck. Someone had damaged it 3 days earlier. Marcus wiped his finger on the napkin, folded it once, placed it beside his plate like a man who respected order. Grace came back with the pot. She was 26, 5 months pregnant, and the kind of tired that showed in posture rather than face. Her smile worked fine. It was everything behind it that had stopped functioning months ago. Around the time they told her that her husband Daniel had crossed a median strip at 2 a.m. and hit a tree at 70 miles an hour. Single car accident, no witnesses, toxicology clean. Case closed in 6 days. Grace buried him on a Thursday and went back to work on Monday because rent doesn't mourn. Quick favor, tap like and subscribe if you've ever kept going when everything in you said stop. Because what happened next in this diner changed everything. More coffee? Grace asked the man at the counter. Marcus looked up, clean-shaven, 53, gray at the temples, the rest dark and precise. He wore a jacket that looked casual, but cost more than the diner's monthly lease. No wedding ring, no watch. His hands were perfectly still. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was warm, the kind of warmth that existed for other people's benefit, not his own. Grace nodded and turned to check on the couple in booth 3. As she moved away, her hip bumped the counter and her glass shifted. She reached back without looking and took a sip. Marcus didn't blink. He didn't glance at the glass. He looked at his phone, scrolled once, and placed a $50 bill beside his untouched plate. Grace noticed the bill when she came back. "Sir, your change." "Keep it," Marcus said, already standing. He buttoned his jacket with one hand, middle button first, then top. A gesture so precise it looked rehearsed, like a man who had practiced looking human. "Thank you," Grace said. The surprise in her voice was small and genuine, the kind that meant big tips didn't happen to her. Marcus nodded once and walked toward the door. His step was measured, unhurried. The bell above the frame chimed softly as he pushed through. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. Late afternoon. North Carolina heat pressing down on the asphalt like a hand. His car, a black sedan with tinted windows, was parked 30 feet from the entrance, angled toward the exit, ready to leave. He made it 22 feet. Then his left leg buckled. It wasn't dramatic. No collapse, no shout. His knee simply stopped holding weight, like a hinge that had come loose. He caught himself on the hood of a parked truck, fingers scraping hot metal. A wave of nausea hit so hard he tasted copper. His vision blurred at the edges, sharpened, then blurred again. His right hand went to his chest, heart rate spiking, breathing shallow. He recognized the symptoms because he had read them in clinical reports. Hundreds of clinical reports. He had signed off on them. Elevated heart rate, loss of motor control, disorientation. Stage 1. Marcus Hale was feeling what his own drug did to people. He turned toward the diner, legs failing, trying to understand. He hadn't drunk from the glass. He'd used a glove, thin, surgical, flesh-colored. He hadn't touched his mouth, hadn't... the coffee. He had taken one sip of coffee when Grace first poured it. One sip, 40 minutes ago. Someone had gotten there first. His knees hit the asphalt, his vision tunneled. He heard a car door open somewhere behind him, then another, then a third. Footsteps, calm, even, unhurried. The kind that belonged to people who had been waiting. Marcus tried to stand, his arms trembled. He couldn't feel his fingers. A pair of shoes appeared in his narrowing line of sight, plain, dark, clean. The person wearing them crouched slowly until Marcus could see a face. Mid-40s, expression flat, eyes steady. The man didn't speak. He just watched Marcus the way Marcus had watched Grace, with patience. Marcus opened his mouth, a threat, a name, a number, but his tongue felt thick. His lips wouldn't form words. The world was tilting, and there was a sound in his ears like water rushing through a pipe. The man stood up. He nodded to someone Marcus couldn't see. "Bring her out through the back," he said, "and get the medic." Marcus tried to process those words. Her, back, medic. Then the asphalt was against his cheek, and the sky was too bright, and the last thing he heard before consciousness slipped was the diner's back door opening and a woman's voice saying, "What's happening out here?" Grace didn't know yet. She wouldn't know for another hour. But the drug in her water, the one Marcus added, was already being neutralized by the pill she'd taken that morning. The pill her doctor prescribed 3 months ago. The same doctor who had been quietly replaced 4 weeks earlier by someone these people trusted more than Marcus trusted anyone. The glass Marcus poisoned was never going to hurt her. And the coffee he thought was clean had been waiting for him since before he sat down. Tap like if you've ever realized someone was being protected the entire time. Because what happened next wasn't about the diner. It was about what Grace's husband found before he died. Grace Morrow met Daniel in college. Not the kind that produced senators and hedge fund managers. The kind that accepted late applications and gave financial aid to people who worked 2 jobs to pay the rest. Both studying chemistry, both broke, both stubborn enough to believe that knowing how molecules worked could somehow change things. Daniel got hired out of grad school by Hale Pharmaceuticals. Best offer either of them had ever seen. Salary, benefits, relocation. They moved to North Carolina, rented a house near the lab, and for 3 years everything looked like the life they'd imagined. Daniel worked on a prenatal supplement called NovaCare, Marcus Hale's flagship product, marketed to pregnant women as a vitamin complex that reduced complications and promoted fetal development. The FDA approved it on an accelerated timeline. Hale Pharmaceuticals stock doubled the quarter it launched. Doctors prescribed it by the millions. Grace took it herself once she got pregnant. Daniel brought it home like a gift. "This is what I've been working on," he said. The pride in his voice was real. She didn't know what he started finding 6 weeks later. Anomalies in the trial data. Small numbers that didn't add up. Adverse reactions coded as unrelated. Control group samples that were statistically impossible unless someone had altered the inputs. Daniel thought it was clerical error at first, then laziness. Then one night he came home and sat at the kitchen table for an hour without speaking. Grace put a plate in front of him. He didn't touch it. "What happened?" she asked. Daniel looked at her, not at her face, at her stomach. The curve just starting to show. His expression was something she'd never seen on him. It looked like guilt. "Nothing," he said. "Long day." Something changed after that. He started bringing files home. He stayed up after Grace fell asleep, working at the table with papers he never left out in the morning. He began driving to a storage unit on his lunch breaks, the kind of place that took cash and didn't check IDs. Grace noticed, but didn't push. Daniel had moods. He processed things internally. She figured he'd tell her when he was ready. He never got to. The accident happened on a Tuesday, 2:14 a.m., State Highway 9, single vehicle. Police report said he lost control on a curve. Speed, possibly fatigue. No drugs, no alcohol. just a tired man driving too late on a dark road. Grace accepted it because she didn't have the energy not to. 5 months pregnant, suddenly alone, and the machinery of grief required all her remaining fuel. She cried, buried him, paid the bills he left behind, and went back to pouring coffee at Ridley's Diner off the county highway. If you've ever buried someone and had to show up to work the next week like the world hadn't ended, tap like. Because Grace was about to find out that Daniel didn't lose control of anything that night. Someone took it from him. The storage unit was the first thing they found. Not the police, not the insurance company. The people who had already been watching, quietly, from a distance, long before Marcus Hale walked into Ridley's Diner. Unit 14 at Pinecrest Storage. Rented under a name Daniel had never used. James Ellis, his mother's maiden name and his grandfather's first. Cash payments. No autopay. No digital trail. Inside, 2 cardboard boxes, a laptop sealed in a plastic bag, and a notebook. The boxes held printed data. Clinical trial results for Novacare, but not the ones submitted to the FDA. The originals. The unedited numbers. The ones that showed what the drug actually did when administered to pregnant women over an extended period. It didn't promote fetal development. In 4.6% of cases, it triggered a cascade of microclotting events that compromised placental blood flow. The effects were slow, gradual, easy to attribute to natural complications: preeclampsia, unexplained bleeding, stillbirth. The kind of outcomes that happened often enough in pregnancy that no one questioned a slight statistical uptick. Unless you were a chemist who ran the numbers himself. Daniel had. Twice. 3 times. He isolated the compound responsible, a synthetic stabilizer added during manufacturing to extend shelf life. On its own, harmless. Combined with the active prenatal ingredients at body temperature over weeks of accumulation, toxic. The notebook was worse. Not a research log, a diary of realization. Short entries, tight handwriting. The first entry questioned a data anomaly. By the middle, he was documenting cover-ups, internal memos buried, meetings denied, colleagues warned not to ask questions. One entry underlined twice. Grace is 12 weeks. She's taking it. She's taking the drug I helped make. The last entry was April 11th. Daniel died April 12th. The laptop contained encrypted copies of everything: data, memos, internal emails discussing acceptable risk thresholds, in language designed to mean nothing in court and everything in context. One email from Marcus Hale himself to the chief medical officer read, "We manage the narrative. Pull Voss from the review board. Replace with someone who understands velocity." Velocity. Internal code for outrunning regulators. Not fixing the problem, outpacing anyone who might notice. Daniel found all of this, documented it, hidden it. Then someone found him. The people who found the storage unit were not police, not journalists, not regulators. 5 of them. Former federal investigators, a physician blacklisted for reporting Novacare complications, and a man named Leland, just Leland, who was the one in the parking lot, the one who crouched beside Marcus and waited. They didn't have a name. They were people separately destroyed by Marcus Hale's machinery who found each other in the wreckage. Their goal? Assemble evidence so solid that no agency could bury it. Daniel's storage unit was the keystone. But evidence alone wasn't enough. They'd seen what happened in cases like this: challenged, discredited, sealed by legal teams with unlimited budgets. They needed Marcus to act. So they waited. And while they waited, they protected Grace. The first thing they did was the doctor. Grace's OBGYN had been prescribing NovaCare for 2 years. Wasn't corrupt, just unaware. Catherine reached out through a medical conference, shared anonymized data, asked what he thought. He was skeptical, then concerned, then quiet. Within 2 weeks, he switched Grace to a different supplement. Grace didn't question it. She didn't know her blood was being monitored by people she'd never met. Didn't know the toxic compound in her system was tracked weekly. Grace just knew her back hurt, her shifts were long, and the baby kicked harder every week. If you've ever gone about your day not knowing someone was fighting for your life, tap like. Because Grace was the most protected woman in North Carolina and had no idea. The second thing they did was the diner. When they started watching Ridley's, they realized Marcus already had surveillance there. A car across the highway, rotating every few days. Different plates, same pattern. He was tracking Grace, not because he knew what Daniel hid, but because he was methodical. Daniel had been flagged before his death, copied files. Marcus had ordered containment. That was the word they used when the real word was too permanent to write down. For months, Grace did nothing unusual. She worked, she slept, she went to appointments. But Marcus's forensic accountant found something in Daniel's bank records. A recurring withdrawal, $85 a month, near a row of storage facilities. 4 months to narrow it down. When they did, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't send anyone. He'd go himself. Marcus Hale didn't trust people. He employed them, leveraged them, but trust was a structural weakness he'd eliminated from his life. Daniel Morrow was supposed to be a minor problem, a chemist with ethical concerns. The industry produced them regularly. You identified them, isolated them, removed them. Daniel's car accident was handled by a contractor Marcus had used before. Clean, no traces, except the storage unit. And while he was in the area, there was Grace, waitress, pregnant, alone, carrying Daniel's child. Marcus didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in timelines. He didn't plan to kill her. That word was too blunt for how he thought. He planned a medical event, natural, tragic, consistent with a high-risk pregnancy. The compound he carried was a concentrated derivative of the same stabilizer that made NovaCare dangerous. A single dose would trigger placental hemorrhaging within 12 to 18 hours. The hospital would call it a complication. Statistics would absorb it. Marcus had done the math. He always did the math. He arrived at Ridley's at 3:47 on a Wednesday. Drove himself. Rental car under a name that didn't trace back. Clothes expensive but not conspicuous. The diner was half full. Truckers, retirees, a woman with 2 kids fighting over crayons. Air that smelled like coffee on the burner since morning. Grace was behind the counter. She looked up, new face, not a regular, and smiled. Muscle memory, not emotion. "Sit anywhere you like," she said. Marcus chose the counter, 3rd stool from the left. Direct line to the water glass she kept beside the register. He ordered toast and black coffee. Grace poured and set the cup in front of him. He noticed her hands, steady despite fatigue. A faded tan line where a wedding ring used to be. "Passing through?" Grace asked. "Business nearby," Marcus said. "Here is honest at least." "That's all I hear is honest at least." "That's all I need." She moved away. Marcus watched her reflection in the napkin dispenser. Her hand pressed against her lower back as she walked. Her feet moved slowly, tired in a way that went deeper than the shift. He waited. At 4:12, the phone behind the register rang. Grace turned. 8 seconds. Marcus moved. Left hand to pocket, right hand over her glass. 1 tap. Powder dissolved on contact. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it down. Grace came back, reached for her glass. 2 swallows. Marcus left the 50, stood, said the coffee was good, walked out. The bell chimed. Grace slipped the 50 into her apron with a bewildered shake of her head. Outside, the heat was immediate. Marcus crossed the lot, keys in his right hand. 30 feet to the car. Engine starts with a button. Highway in 4 minutes. Storage facility in 12. Airport by evening. Clean, quiet, done. 22 feet, left leg folded. The first thought was cardiac. Hand to the sternum, pressing hard. But the rhythm was wrong. Too fast, not irregular. This wasn't his heart. Something chemical. He dropped to one knee. Vision strobed, stomach convulsed. Fingers tingled, went numb, tingled again. He recognized the cascade. He'd read it in trial data, seen it in graphs, heard it described in clinical language designed to soften the edges. Loss of motor coordination, autonomic instability, vasodilation, acute hypotension. His drug, his compound. But he hadn't ingested it. He'd used the glove, hadn't touched his mouth, hadn't... The coffee. One sip, 40 minutes ago, when Grace first poured. Someone put the compound in his cup before he sat down. The understanding hit with a clarity that felt almost pharmaceutical. Someone knew he was coming, knew what he would bring, and decided that Marcus Hale would feel exactly what he intended for a pregnant woman working a 10-hour shift. His palms slid on the asphalt. The world tilted. Car doors, 1, 2, 3. And footsteps that didn't rush. Tap, like if you've ever watched someone powerful lose control of their own body. Because Marcus was about to meet the people he'd been looking for. 4 of them. 3 men, 1 woman. They moved without urgency, like people arriving at an appointment scheduled weeks ago. Leland reached Marcus first. Crouched, forearms on knees. Looked at him the way a doctor reads a scan. Marcus tried to speak. Lips moved. Words came out broken. "Who—" "Breathe through it," Leland said. "No hostility, no satisfaction. Peak hits in about 90 seconds. Then it plateaus. You won't lose consciousness. You'll just wish you could." Marcus's eyes widened. Nausea surged. Fingers clawed at the ground. "You know what this feels like," Leland said. "Because you made it. You hid what it did. And you sold it to women who trusted their doctors." Marcus shook his head. Not denial. Vertigo. Catherine walked past him and entered the diner through the back. Leland's eyes stayed on Marcus. "The storage unit," Marcus rasped. "I need—" "You don't need anything in that unit. We've had it for 5 months." Marcus's face changed. The mask cracked. Underneath was something pale and twitching. "Your chemist was smarter than you thought," Leland said. "Copies, notebook, timeline, every email, including yours." He paused. "The compound you're feeling right now, your compound, was administered at a dose equivalent to what a pregnant woman accumulates over 6 weeks of Novacare. Not enough to kill you, just enough to show you what you've been doing to them." Marcus's breathing was ragged. He tried to push himself up and failed. "You'll recover," Leland said, standing, "in about 4 hours, which is roughly the time the FBI needs to arrive." Inside the diner, Grace was sitting in a booth and didn't know why. Catherine had come through the back, calm and professional, and asked Martha if she could speak with Grace privately. Martha looked confused, but nodded. Catherine sat across from Grace, set a glass of water on the table, fresh, sealed bottle, opened in front of her, and said, "Don't drink anything that was already poured." Grace stared. "What?" "My name is Catherine Price. I'm a doctor. I need you to come with me to a hospital right now." "I'm in the middle of a shift," Grace said. "The way people do when reality tries to change too fast and the brain grabs the nearest normal thing to hold." Catherine's expression softened. "Grace, the man at your counter, do you know who he is?" "No, he left a big tip." "His name is Marcus Hale. He's the CEO of the company that made the prenatal vitamins you were taking." Grace blinked. I stopped those. My doctor switched me. I know, Catherine said. I'm the reason he switched you. Grace went still. The diner noise, plates, conversation, the hiss of the coffee machine receded. I don't understand. Catherine opened a folder. Inside, a single printed lab report with Grace's name. 3 months ago, your blood showed elevated levels of a compound called THX7. It's not on the NovaCare label. It's a synthetic stabilizer that accumulates in placental tissue. In sufficient concentration, it causes clotting that leads to hemorrhage. Grace looked at the numbers. They meant nothing. The word hemorrhage meant everything. Her hand went to her stomach. Your baby is fine, Catherine said quickly. We caught it. We got you off the drug in time. Your levels have been dropping for weeks, but you need to be checked today. Grace's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. Why would... Who? Your husband found it. He found the data that proved NovaCare was dangerous. He tried to hide the evidence, and Marcus Hale had him killed for it. The words landed in the booth like something dropped from a great height. Grace didn't cry, didn't speak. She sat with her hands on her stomach and stared at the table. Daniel didn't fall asleep driving, Grace said. Not a question. No. And the man at the counter came here to hurt you, to make it look medical, to make sure you never found what Daniel left behind. Grace's jaw tightened. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not rage, not grief. A recalibration. The world she'd been living in for 5 months rearranged itself, and she watched every piece fall into a new and terrible place. Where is he now? She asked. In the parking lot, experiencing what he intended for you. Grace looked toward the window. Through the glass, a man on his knees on the asphalt, surrounded by people who didn't seem impressed. She stared for a long time, then stood up, untied her apron, folded it once on the table. Take me to the hospital. The drive took 11 minutes. Catherine sat beside Grace. No sirens, no drama. Grace watched trees pass through tinted glass and said nothing for 7 minutes. Then, how long have you been watching me? Since 3 weeks after Daniel's death. Why didn't you tell me? If you knew, your behavior would change. If it changed, Marcus would notice. He had people watching you, cars across the highway, rotating every few days. Grace went quiet. She thought about the cars she'd noticed and dismissed. So you let me grieve. Let me think it was an accident. We got you off the pills as fast as we safely could. And my baby? Let's find out. The hospital was small, clean, and expecting them. Private room, 3rd floor. An OBGYN already there, scrubbed in, machine ready, calm in the way only people who deliver bad news for a living can be calm when the news might be good. Cold gel. Probe pressed low on Grace's abdomen. Static. Then, a heartbeat. Fast, rhythmic, relentless. Grace's eyes closed. Tears ran down both sides of her face and soaked into the pillow. Strong, the doctor said. Very strong. No distress. Placenta healthy. Blood flow normal. Grace pressed her hand over her mouth and sobbed. A sound so raw it didn't belong in a clinical room. Catherine stood by the door, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. He's fine, Grace whispered. He's fine. For a long time, the only sound was the baby's heartbeat filling the room like a small, stubborn drum. Leland arrived an hour later, entered without knocking, not rudely, but like someone who had earned the right to skip formality. Grace was sitting up, 4 in her arm, color returning. Marcus Hale is in federal custody, Leland said, no preamble. Transported 40 minutes ago. The compound in his system is being documented as evidence. Grace watched him. Will it hold? Leland's eyebrow moved a fraction, the closest thing to surprise she'd seen from him. Yes, the storage unit evidence has been with the FBI for 2 months. Daniel's laptop was decrypted by a former NSA analyst who now teaches high school math in Delaware. Internal emails verified, red line memo authenticated, and the compound in Marcus's coffee matches the stabilizer flagged in Daniel's research. He paused. 14 women came forward since the investigation was unsealed this morning. Women who lost pregnancies on NovaCare and were told it was natural. Grace's hand rested on her stomach. The monitor beeped. "There will be more," Leland said. "This is the beginning." A woman entered, dark blazer, no jewelry, the kind of face that suggested she'd stopped decorating herself the day she passed the bar. "My name is Diane. I'm your attorney." "I didn't hire an attorney." "Daniel did." Grace stared. 8 months ago, your husband retained me through an anonymous trust, paid in advance, sealed envelope with instructions to contact you only if something happened to him, and only when it was safe. She opened a folder. Inside, an envelope, yellowed at the edges, with Grace's name in Daniel's handwriting. Grace's hand trembled as she picked it up. She ran her thumb over the ink. His letters, his pen pressure, the slight leftward slant he never could fix. She didn't open it immediately. She held it against her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed. If you've ever received something from someone you lost and felt them right beside you, tap like. Because this letter was the last thing Daniel ever wrote. She opened it alone. Leland stepped out. Catherine stepped out. Diane stepped out. Even the nurse found a reason to check something elsewhere. Grace unfolded the single page. Handwriting steady at the top, shaky at the bottom. Like he started with certainty and ended with fear. She read it once, then again, then pressed it flat on her knees and stared at the wall. She never shared the contents, not with the lawyers, not with the press. The letter stayed in a drawer beside her bed, next to the ultrasound and the wedding ring she'd stopped wearing because it hurt too much to look at. But what she did share, later that evening, sitting up with Diane and a federal agent and a recorder on the tray, was everything else. Her statement took 2 hours. She didn't cry. She spoke the way Daniel used to explain chemistry, precise, logical, building toward a conclusion already inevitable. She described the pills, the doctor visits, the fatigue she'd blamed on pregnancy, the car parked across from the diner she'd learned to ignore, the man at the counter who left a 50 and walked out like he'd done nothing. And she described Daniel. Not the version from the police report, the tired man who fell asleep driving. The real one. The man who came home one night and looked at her stomach with guilt in his eyes because the drug he helped create was inside the woman he loved. When she finished, the agent turned off the recorder. "Anything else you want to add?" Grace looked at the monitor. The heartbeat. Steady, fast, alive. "His name will be Daniel," she said, "after his father." The trial lasted 4 months. Marcus Hale's legal team tried everything. Challenge the evidence, question methods, argue entrapment. None of it held. Data verified by 3 independent labs. Emails authenticated by Hale's own IT department. The red line memo bore Marcus's handwritten initials. The compound from his coffee matched the stabilizer Daniel flagged. 14 women testified, then 23, then 31. Each told a version of the same story. A pregnancy that should have been healthy. A drug from a trusted doctor. A loss treated as natural. Marcus sat through every testimony. His expression stayed controlled. The practiced look of a man who wanted the jury to believe he cared. It cracked once. A woman named Sandra described holding her stillborn daughter while a nurse said, "Sometimes these things happen." Marcus's left hand twitched. His attorney touched his arm. Marcus pulled away. The jury noticed. Guilty, all counts. Fraud, conspiracy, involuntary manslaughter, 31 counts. Obstruction, evidence tampering. And one charge that made headlines for weeks. The attempted poisoning of Grace Morrow, a pregnant waitress in a diner off a county highway in North Carolina. Marcus was sentenced on a Thursday. Grace wasn't in the courtroom. She was in a hospital for a different reason this time. Her son was born at 6:14 a.m., 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Screaming with the kind of fury that suggested he'd inherited his father's stubbornness. She named him Daniel. Leland visited once, 3 weeks after the birth. Came alone. Brought nothing. Grace was in a small house outside town. The baby slept in a crib Martha from the diner found at a yard sale and repainted herself. Leland stood in the doorway. "You could have told me sooner," Grace said. "Yes. What happens now?" NovaCare is recalled. Hale Pharmaceuticals under receivership. Civil suit organizing. "And you?" Leland paused. First time she'd seen him without an answer. "We're done. The case is in the system now." Grace looked at the crib. "Daniel's notebook. I want it. It's evidence. It's my husband's handwriting." Long pause. "I'll see what I can do." He turned to leave, stopped at the door. "He was brave," Leland said. "He knew the risk." Grace's eyes burned. He was scared, and brave, and right, and nobody listened until he was dead. Leland nodded once, walked to his car. Grace closed the door. The baby made a sound, not crying, just existing. She picked him up, held him against her chest, felt the warmth and weight and impossible smallness of a life that almost didn't happen. The diner would open tomorrow. Martha held her shifts. Counter needed wiping, coffee needed brewing. Grace would go back, not because she had to, but because the diner was where a man in an expensive jacket sat down, ordered toast he didn't eat, and discovered that the most dangerous thing in the room wasn't the poison he carried. It was the fact that someone had been watching longer than he had. And that was the part people missed when they talked about the case. They focused on the billionaire, the trial, the 31 women who stood up and said, "This happened to me." But the turning point was quieter. A chemist who came home one night, looked at his pregnant wife, and decided silence wasn't something he could live with. He was right. He didn't live with it. But because of what he chose, his son did.